Imagine a man who never lost a duel. A man who faced over 60 opponents in life or death battles and walked away victorious every single time. But this man wasn't just a master of the sword, he was a master of the mind. A philosopher, a strategist, and a warrior who lived by a code that shaped not only his battles, but the rest of his life. This is the story of Miyamoto Musashi, the most feared and respected samurai in Japanese history. Born in 1584, during Japan's feudal era, Musashi grew up in a world where a man's worth was measured by his skill in battle. But Musashi wasn't just any warrior. From a young age, he understood that the true path of the warrior wasn't just about mastering the sword, it was about mastering oneself. By the time he was just 13 years old, Musashi had already killed his first opponent in a duel. 13 years old and he killed someone in a duel. That's like considered a child now. A 13-year-old killing someone. But he didn't stop there. Musashi spent the next several decades of his life traveling across Japan, challenging and defeating the best swordsmen he could find. What made Musashi different wasn't just his skill with a blade, it was his mindset. Musashi didn't fight with anger or ego. He fought with strategy, with discipline. He knew that every battle was won or lost in the mind long before the first strike was ever made. And that's where Musashi excelled. He saw each duel as a way to refine not just his technique, but his spirit. Every fight was an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to become stronger. In his later years, Musashi retired from dueling, but his journey of self-mastery did not end. He turned to writing and philosophy, capturing his insights in one of the most influential martial arts texts ever written, the Book of Five Rings. In this book, Musashi laid out his philosophy on strategy, not just for combat, but for life. He spoke about the importance of flexibility, of adapting to every situation, and of the relentless pursuit of self-improvement. Musashi's teachings go beyond the battlefield. They are lessons for anyone seeking to live with purpose and discipline. He taught that life itself is a series of duels, challenges that test our resolve, our character, and our spirit. And the way we approach these challenges determines who we become. Everyone in their lives experiences challenges at some point, whether it's with discipline, motivation, or just life in general. There's challenges and things that could affect our lives if we allow them to. Things that if we don't control or we don't take control of, will ultimately take control of us. And so we need to be aware of these things and be prepared to respond to anything, any situation. Because if we're not prepared for a certain situation, if we're not prepared in the case that someone tries to attack us, if we're not prepared to step back and reflect upon our own lives, if we're not prepared to do the things that are necessary, ultimately it will affect our lives. So we need to be ready for any situation. And I know you can't really prepare for every situation. You're not going to have the perfect practice of that specific situation. But we can train, we can build our bodies up, we can learn how to fight, we can learn how to defend ourselves so that whatever situation it is, we're ready. And the odds are it's not going to happen. The odds are you'll probably be fine without learning that skill, without learning how to defend yourself. But when the moment does come, the one that you were never expecting to happen, the moment that you need to protect your friends, family, loved ones, or even just yourself, the moment you realize that you need to return to your family, you need to return to your kids. A lot of us aren't prepared for that sacrifice, for that moment, whether it's at war or you're defending yourself or you're in the subway and someone's attacking you. It can be anything. And as a man, it's your duty to be ready for these situations, to be ready to react, to be ready and prepared for any situation, and to have some sort of control over your outcome, over what happens to you. The trials and tribulations that we go through make us stronger. And Musashi learned this at a very young age. He learned that every single man should be ready for the worst case scenario. He should be ready to react in the worst case scenario in everything he does. But he also shouldn't fear that scenario. He should be aware that it could happen, and he should have the confidence that if it does happen, he knows exactly what to do. Because if that situation did happen and we weren't prepared, where does that put us? Where does that put the man being unprepared? As a man, it is your duty to protect. It is your duty to guard and shield your family and other people, because who else is going to? If you don't do it as a man, who else is going to step up and do it? You're going to rely on someone else? You're going to rely on your girlfriend, your wife? If no one is willing to step up to the plate, how are you going to react in those situations? You can't. You can't be dependent on anyone else to protect your loved ones except for yourself. So as a man, it's your duty to protect them. It is your duty also to protect yourself so that you can return to those loved ones. You can return home to the people you care about. It is your duty as a man to be ready for any adversary to be strong enough to take on any adversary, and to protect your family from any adversary. It is your duty to protect your blood and to protect your way of life, the ideas you have, and your ultimate purpose and mission. And when a man gets too comfortable, too complacent, when he isn't continuously growing and shedding layers of purpose, shedding layers of his life, building up his body, his physique, preparing for battle in all ways, when he isn't doing that, he's not only putting himself at risk, he's putting his family and his livelihood and his loved ones and his country at risk. When a man isn't ready to defend himself, to defend his country and his people, when he isn't ready to fight for what he believes in, or when he's too fearful, then he cannot be trusted in the face of combat, in the face of adversity. He wouldn't be prepared for those situations. So we must be aware. We must develop ourselves and prepare and be ready for anything. Even if it seems like those situations will never happen, we must be prepared to handle them. And it's not only a physical thing of being prepared physically, but also mentally, being prepared to go through hard times mentally. Sure, the economy is doing well now, but will it be good in 4 months? In a year, 2 years? Surely enough, there's going to be hard times. And those hard times are going to separate the sheep from the wolves. The men who can take the burden and push through versus the ones who stop and fail. The ones who need support. Maybe now the business is doing well, but we need to be ready if it collapses. We can't put emotional dependence, or at least too much emotional dependence, on material things or things that we don't control. If you lost everything you have today, everything except for what you have, are you ready for that? Are you prepared to lose everything except for yourself, everything that's around you? Are you prepared to lose all of your money? I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm saying it could happen, and you need to be ready for it. Are you prepared? Are you prepared to defend yourself as well as you could in any situation? These are all questions that we have to ask ourselves with humility. And if we're lacking in any of those things, if we're not prepared to lose everything, we need to train ourselves to be able to live without those things that we're dependent on. We need to train ourselves to be prepared to defend what we have, and we also have to be prepared to lose it. And so going through these trials and tribulations is what makes us stronger. Because, okay, think about this. If you had a man who went through the easy way in life, who did the easy things, he got a decent job. He doesn't really like the job, but he does it anyway because it's a decent job and it pays him enough to be kind of happy. And it's like this comfort zone. He lives in this comfort zone for the rest of his life. So he works a job he doesn't have any passion for the rest of his life. So it turns out he works a job he hates for the rest of his life, but they pay him good enough to make a living. So he lives like this for the rest of his life versus the guy who sets out to do his mission. For example, he wants to be a professional fighter. And so he doesn't go the traditional route. He starts fighting and he's earning barely any money, not even enough to make a living. This man had to stay on the streets. He had to find a way to make a living. He had to find a way to pursue his passion as good as possible. This fighter kept on going, and eventually he found a way to make money. He found a way to teach other fighters how to fight, but also his philosophies in life. And this fighter went on to do greater things. We don't know for sure whether he became a professional fighter or he helped other people become fighters or taught them how to fight. But whatever it is, he dedicated his life to it and fulfilled a purpose greater than just idly watching his life go by. He fulfilled something that had meaning to him. And so if you met these two people, you met the guy that had to live on the streets for some time, the guy that went through hardship. He knew he was going to make it, but he knew he had to go through this pain to get to where he wanted to be. If you met these two guys right now, the boxer would have a lot more character, wouldn't he? If you spoke to him, he would have a lot more lessons he learned, going through trials and tribulation, making mistakes. The boxer that lived on the streets for some time before he actually made a living learned a lot more about life than the guy who stayed in comfort the whole time, the guy who worked a job he hated the whole time, and the guy who lived his life on easy mode. And so these trials and tribulations are what strengthen us, what give us the tenacity to move forward, what give us the motivation and the discipline to keep going on our goals, on our mission. And so if you sacrifice your mission in life and your purpose for anything other than your mission and your purpose, then you will live a life unfulfilled. And you will also live a life of regret. Because imagine this, he wanted to do boxing, but instead he stuck with the job that he liked and did that job for the rest of his life until he retired. And sure, he lived a long life, but what did he do within that span of time? Was the quality of his time good, working a job he hated until he retired? Was his quality of life good? Was his mission purposeful? No, he wanted to be a boxer. And he got to that old age and he's like, I wish I tried boxing. I wish I started boxing when I was young, or I wish I did this when I was young, instead of settling and doing this the easy way. And the boxer, do you think he regretted trying to pursue his purpose? Honestly, do you think he regretted it? even if he failed, he knew he tried and he knew what he wanted to do and did the best he possibly could to do it. And even if he failed at doing it, the quality of his life for that time, even though it was technically lower because he was living poor, the amount of lessons he learned, the things he learned while he was on the streets, the hardships, the amount he learned from that, from those lessons is so much more than the guy that lived to 60 and retired and died. The guy fulfilling his purpose, or the guy who's reaching his goals, trying his best, even in the face of failure, he's still going. So I want you to keep that in mind whenever you sacrifice your purpose for money, whenever you sacrifice your purpose for something other than fulfilling it. Keep that in mind, because ultimately your mission as a man is the most important thing you can provide to the world. Your mission as a man is also the most important thing you can provide to yourself and for the fulfillment of your life, but also for the lives around you, for the fulfillment of humankind in general. And so if you don't know what your purpose is, stop what you're doing right now and figure that out. Because if you're living life on the mundane, on the things that aren't really important to you, the things that pretty much don't matter, but they seem so important because the public portrays it as important. If you don't know what your purpose is, if you don't know what your mission is, stop what you're doing right now and find out, because otherwise you're wasting your time on earth if you don't know what it is. You're wasting your time that you could be putting towards your mission, time that you could be putting towards your greater purpose in life. Because sooner than later, you're gonna be old, and depending on what you do right now, depending on the decisions you make right now, it's likely that you're gonna look back at your life with regrets, with things you wish, with things that you wish you tried. And it all comes down to the present moment. And the present moment is constantly coming and going. And soon enough, that moment's going to be gone. So you need to make the decision now what your purposeful mission is if you don't know what it is already. And by the way, it's not something that just all of a sudden happens. It takes time, and it also takes separation from influences, whether they're good or bad influences. Separation from the noise that clouds your mind. But the good thing is, the message now is in your head, and I think you're going to make the decision to act on it. My name's Justin, and remember, you deserve the consequences of your actions.